In the pillars of the earth, the people of Kingsbridge built a great cathedral. In World Without End, their descendants coped with the most terrible plague that the human race has ever known, the Black Death. And in A Column of Fire, they lived through the political earthquake that shook Europe in the 16th century, which was Protestantism. The story begins in Kingsbridge. In 1558, our young hero goes to work for Princess Elizabeth, and he comes here to this house, Hatfield Old Palace, which is where the princess lived before she was queen. And he finds himself at the heart of the intrigues of English politics. In the 16th century, Europe was divided into Protestants and Catholics. When Queen Elizabeth I became Queen of England, she was the only Protestant monarch of a major country. Before she became Queen, Queen Elizabeth said, "It is my dearest wish that when I'm Queen, no man will be killed for his beliefs." Queen Elizabeth I became public enemy number one in Europe. Everybody wanted to assassinate her, the Pope, the King of Spain, the King of France. And so she set up the first English secret service to protect herself, a spy organisation, the very first. The young hero of A Column of Fire goes to work for her. He's a sort of 16th century James Bond. And so my story begins in Kingsbridge, but spreads all over 16th century Europe. The important thing for me, and the reason I want to look at these places and walk around them, is that I've got to imagine these dramatic events happening. And when I come to imagine it, I need to know that I have an accurate picture in my head of what the place was like. And then I can imagine the people moving around and the drama and the dialogue and the atmosphere. If I don't know this stuff, I'm constantly stumbling over the fact that I don't know. Not knowing is an obstacle to my imagination. You know, by the time I make this trip, I've planned a scene in this city. And so my curiosity is already aroused. What would it have been like? I've got a scene on the waterfront in Seville. Well, what is the waterfront like? This is the kind of thing that you can't fudge. You have to have the exact details. You have to get them right to create that excitement. Paris in the 16th century was very different from the city we know today. I wanted to look at bits of Paris that still appear the same as they did in the 16th century. My friend Professor Donald Sassoon is a historian. He knows Paris very well, particularly medieval Paris. I asked him to walk around with me. This is the Pont Notre Dame, the Notre Dame Bridge, and it was here in the 16th century, but in that era there would have been houses and shops on both sides of the road.
This is Rue de Neve, and lots of people lived here. 2, 3, 4 people in the same room.
This is a map of Paris in about 1550. It's a wonderful piece of work because it's half a street plan and half a bird's eye view. This helps me to imagine my characters moving around these streets. This row of shops, or something very like it, was here in the 16th century, and I've imagined that my French hero, who's a woman called Sylvie, lives in this stretch. Her father has a bookshop and printing works, and they sell, as well as normal books, they sell illegal books, which are things like Protestant literature, such as the Bible in French. And of course the perfect place to do it is in the shadow of Notre Dame Cathedral. Here we are in the Cathedral of the Holy Cross, on the bank of the River Loire, in the great French town of Orléans. I've just learned The original cathedral was demolished by the Protestants in 1568. They blew up the 4 pillars supporting the bell tower, and when the tower collapsed, it destroyed pretty much the whole building. Such a dramatic episode, I think I'd better put it in the book. In the 16th century, the richest city in Europe was Antwerp. Here there were Jews, Muslims, Catholics, and Protestants. An interesting place to take my readers to as part of this international drama. I'm in the Museum of London, in the heart of the old city of London, and I'm here to find out about the clothes that my characters would have worn in the 16th century. Here is some very mundane 16th century clothing. A brown sock, knitted. Knitting was a relatively new thing in the 16th century. And in a column of fire, Barney Willard, a fictional character, goes to sea, and I'm finding out what he might have worn as a sailor in the 16th century. We're looking at a shirt, very beautifully embroidered. I think I'd like a shirt like that. This is the National Portrait Gallery. The fictional characters in the book are of course made up by me, so I make up whether they've got blonde hair or brown eyes. But there are quite a lot of real characters, and this is where I come to find out what those people looked like, what Queen Elizabeth looked like. Queen Elizabeth I of England, here in her prime, about 40. Look at the strength in that face. She needed to be strong. This painter has caught her vanity, incredibly elaborate dress, very careful hairdo, thick white makeup. I think what he hasn't caught here is what she was famous for, which was for being a flirt. This was a powerful political weapon for her because she pretended she was going to marry a whole string of Catholic princes. This fooled many people into thinking that one day some man would marry her, control her, and bring her back to the true religion. And of course, that was just not going to happen. So everybody who tried to kill Elizabeth wanted to replace her with a Catholic monarch so that England would become Catholic again. The person they all had in mind was Mary, Queen of Scots. She was a good Catholic. She had a claim to the English throne. In fact, according to the Pope, she was the rightful Queen of England. And these two women, who actually never met, were enemies. Mary, Queen of Scots, escaped from a prison in Scotland. And when you do a scene like that, an escape from a prison, the physical details are absolutely paramount. That's where the suspense comes from. How high is the wall? Is the gate locked? Who's watching? Who might be watching? So I felt I really needed to go and look at this prison on an island in the middle of a lake in Scotland. And the first thing that happened was I realized how important the weather was, because I got into this little boat to go from the mainland to the island, and it was pouring and windy and the water was quite rough. And so I immediately realized that the weather could be a crucial element of this story. So it's one chapter in the book, and it's rather delightfully tragic. This very sparky young woman escapes from one prison and sadly 2 weeks later ends up in another prison. I grew up in an evangelical Christian sect, the Plymouth Brethren. All my relatives belonged to the same church. So all four grandparents, I had lots of aunts and uncles and cousins, all lived in or near Cardiff, where I was born, and all went to the various chapels of this sect dotted around South Wales. Our beliefs included a kind of sweeping Puritanism. So any form of pleasure was considered wicked in my childhood. Pleasure itself was a bad word. So I wasn't allowed to go to the movies. We didn't have a TV or a radio in the house. Strangely enough, my parents omitted to censor the books I read. At the age of 12, I started reading James Bond. And I'm still not quite sure why they didn't clamp down on that. Very violent James Bond stories with a hero whose philosophy of life was about as contrary to that of the Plymouth Brethren as you could get. I almost find it amusing now to read the kind of things that Protestants said in the 16th century about Catholics and recall that I was told those things as a child as if they were true. I hasten to add that I haven't believed any of that stuff since I reached the age of reason, but it does give me a certain familiarity with the kind of conflicts that I'm writing about in this 16th century story. Excitement and action in a story is all very well, but it's much better if it's in aid of some cause, like winning a war. I always like these adventures to be attached to something real, and the issue in the 16th century was religious tolerance. You were supposed to go to the church that the king told you to go to and say the prayers the king told you to say, but there were a few people who fought for the freedom to go to whatever church you like, sing whatever hymns you like, read the Bible in your own language. These were the things that people fought for. I don't want people to think it's a book about religion, although I talk a lot about religion. It's not about religion, it's about tolerance, it's about human rights. This is the first battle we fought for freedom. It comes before democracy, before the rule of law, before freedom of speech. Freedom of religion is kind of the base upon which all the other freedoms were built. Once we'd started that fight, then we could say, not only does everybody have the right to their own religion, they also have their right to their own opinion about everything else. I still love The Pillars of the Earth, but it's been fun to write a more wide-ranging story in World Without End. And now in A Column of Fire, the scope and the geography of the novel is much bigger. I'm still incredibly fond of Kingsbridge, and so are the readers, so we still spend a lot of time there.